What happens when one of the most beloved members of the British royal family sits down for what should be a friendly late-night chat, only to find himself under a vicious attack from a host who seems determined to destroy his reputation on live television? You won't believe what unfolds when Prince Harry faces off against Stephen Colbert in what quickly becomes the most explosive talk show confrontation in recent memory. The tension was palpable from the moment the Duke of Sussex walked onto that stage, but nobody could have predicted the verbal warfare that was about to erupt. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when a respected royal meets a host who apparently had no intention of showing even basic courtesy to his guest. The Late Show's studio audience was buzzing with excitement as Prince Harry made his entrance, that familiar warm smile lighting up his face as he waved to the crowd. The applause was thunderous, lasting nearly 30 seconds as America's favorite royal settled into the guest chair across from Stephen Colbert. What the audience didn't know was that behind the scenes, tensions had already begun to simmer. Sources close to the production revealed that Colbert had spent the afternoon poring over research materials, but not the kind you'd expect for a typical celebrity interview. "Your Royal Highness, welcome to the show," Colbert began, his trademark grin plastered across his face, though those paying close attention might have noticed it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Though I suppose I should ask, is that still the proper way to address you these days?" Prince Harry's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a slight tightening around his eyes that suggested he'd already picked up on the subtle dig. "Just, Harry is fine, Stephen. Thank you for having me." "Oh, just Harry now," Colbert replied, leaning back in his chair with an exaggerated nod. "I love that. Very American of you, wouldn't you say? Speaking of which, how are you finding life in your adopted homeland? Must be quite the adjustment, trading in those palace walls for the sunny shores of Montecito." The audience chuckled, but Harry's media-trained instincts were already kicking in. Years of dealing with hostile press had taught him to recognize when someone was laying groundwork for an attack. "It's been wonderful, actually. Meghan and I have found a real sense of peace there. The children love it." "Peace," Colbert repeated, drawing out the word as if he were tasting something bitter. "That's interesting, because from where I'm sitting, it seems like there's been quite a bit of, how should I put this, noise coming from your direction lately. Books, documentaries, interviews. For someone seeking peace, you certainly seem to have a lot to say about the family you left behind." The studio fell noticeably quieter. This wasn't the playful banter audiences expected from Colbert's celebrity interviews. Harry's jaw tightened slightly, but his voice remained steady. "I think it's important to tell your own story, Stephen, especially when others have been telling it for you, often inaccurately." "Ah, yes, your truth," Colbert said, making air quotes with his fingers. "I have to say, I'm fascinated by this concept, because traditionally, we've operated under the assumption that there's just, the truth. But apparently, you've discovered that everyone gets their own personal version now. Very postmodern of you." Several audience members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This was clearly not the light-hearted royal interview they'd expected. Harry's media training was being put to the test as he maintained his composure despite the increasingly hostile tone. "I think when you've lived through experiences that have been misrepresented in the media for years, you understand the difference between facts and the narrative that's been constructed around those facts," Harry replied carefully. "My family has always had a complicated relationship with the press." Colbert pounced on the opening. "Your family? That's interesting phrasing. Because technically, they're still your family, aren't they? Or have you found a way to divorce yourself from genetics as well as royal duties?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Harry's knuckles were white as he gripped the armrests of his chair, though his voice remained controlled. "Of course they're still my family, Stephen. Family relationships are complicated. I think most people can relate to that. Most people don't write tell-all books about their complicated family relationships and then tour the world discussing them on every available platform." Colbert shot back. "Most people don't accuse their family of racism on international television. Most people don't." "Hold on," Harry interrupted, his composure finally beginning to crack. "I think you're mischaracterizing what actually happened. If you're going to discuss these topics, let's at least be accurate about what was said and in what context." Colbert's grin widened, like a predator sensing weakness. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I get something wrong? Please, enlighten us. Tell us exactly what you meant when you and your wife sat down with Oprah and discussed concerns about your son's skin color. Because the rest of us mere mortals interpreted that as a pretty serious accusation. The audience was now completely silent, the uncomfortable tension filling every corner of the studio. Harry's face had flushed red, and for the first time in the interview, his carefully maintained royal composure was showing cracks. That conversation was taken out of context and blown completely out of proportion by people who weren't there and don't understand the nuances of what was actually discussed, Harry said, his voice rising slightly. And frankly, I'm disappointed that you're choosing to perpetuate these misunderstandings rather than having a genuine conversation. Misunderstandings. Colbert's voice dripped with mock incredulity. Your Royal Highness, you went on the most watched interview in years and made explosive claims about the institution you were born into. You can't exactly put that genie back in the bottle by calling it a misunderstanding now. But this was only the beginning. As the commercial break approached, both men were locked in a staring contest that promised an even more explosive confrontation was yet to come. The audience could sense they were witnessing something unprecedented, something that would be talked about for years to come. What they didn't know was that the worst was still ahead, and by the time the cameras stopped rolling, one of these two men would be storming off the stage in a fury that would shake the very foundations of late-night television. During the commercial break, the tension backstage was electric. Producers scrambled to figure out how to salvage what was rapidly becoming a public relations nightmare, while Harry sat rigid in his chair, his jaw clenched so tight you could practically hear his teeth grinding. Colbert, meanwhile, seemed energized by the confrontation, like a boxer who'd just landed his first solid punch and could taste victory in the air. We're back in 30 seconds, the floor manager announced, but his voice carried the weight of someone who knew they were about to witness a train wreck in real time. The studio audience, still buzzing with nervous energy from what they'd just witnessed, had no idea that the host was about to escalate things to a level that would make the first segment look like a friendly chat. As the cameras rolled again, Colbert's demeanor had shifted. Gone was any pretense of civility or professional courtesy. His eyes gleamed with something that looked disturbingly like hunger as he leaned forward in his chair, ready to go in for the kill. Welcome back, Colbert said to the camera, his voice carrying a sinister undertone that made several audience members visibly uncomfortable. We're here with Prince Harry, who's been explaining to us how everyone else has got his story wrong. It's fascinating, really, this idea that a grown man can spend years making very public accusations against his family and then act surprised when people take those accusations seriously. Harry's knuckles were white as he gripped his chair. Stephen, I think you're deliberately misrepresenting, am I? Colbert cut him off with theatrical surprise. Because I've got the transcripts right here. Would you like me to read them back? To you? Your exact words about how your father cut you off financially? About conversations that were had about Archie's skin tone? About how trapped you felt? These aren't interpretations, Harry. These are direct quotes. The audience was dead. Silent now, the discomfort palpable. This had crossed every line of what was considered acceptable behavior for a talk show host. Harry's face was flushed with anger, but he was still trying to maintain some semblance of composure. Those conversations were part of a larger context that you're conveniently ignoring, Harry said through gritted teeth. And frankly, I'm starting to question whether you actually invited me here for an interview or just to ambush me on live television. Colbert laughed, but it was a cold, calculated sound that sent chills through the studio. Oh, this is rich. You spend years ambushing your own family in the media, and now you're upset about being asked direct questions about your own words? Do you hear yourself right now? I never ambushed anyone. Harry shot back, his voice rising. I defended my wife and my family against a machine that was trying to destroy us. Something you clearly wouldn't understand, sitting here in your comfortable studio making jokes about other people's pain. Your pain. Colbert's voice dripped with sarcasm. You mean the pain of being born into unimaginable privilege? The pain of having every door opened for you your entire life? The pain of inheriting millions of dollars and a title that people would kill for? That pain. The confrontation had reached a boiling point. Harry was visibly shaking with rage now, his carefully maintained royal composure completely shattered. You have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. You think privilege means you can't suffer? You think money means you can't be hurt by the people who are supposed to love you? I think, Colbert said, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper, that most people would trade places with your suffering in a heartbeat. I think most people watching this right now are wondering how someone with your advantages in life became such a professional victim. The studio gasped audibly. Several audience members looked genuinely shocked at the viciousness of the attack. This had gone far beyond tough questioning into something that felt personal and cruel. Harry stood up abruptly, his chest heaving with anger. Professional victim? Are you out of your mind? I served my country in Afghanistan while you were here. Making jokes about politicians. I've spent my entire adult life trying to use whatever platform I have to help people who actually need it. And you're sitting here, what? Trying to score points by attacking someone for speaking honestly about their experiences. Colbert remained seated, but his posture was predatory, like a cat playing with a wounded mouse. Oh, please, spare me the war hero routine. You flew helicopters in one of the most protected positions in the military, while actual soldiers did the real fighting. And as for helping people, is that what you call it when you destroy your family's reputation for a Netflix deal? The audience was now completely silent, many looking genuinely disturbed by what they were witnessing. This had crossed every boundary of decency and professional conduct. Harry was pacing now, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. How dare you? Harry said, his voice shaking with fury. How dare you sit there and minimize the service of anyone who put their life on the line? And how dare you reduce everything I've tried to do to some cynical money grab? You don't know me, you don't know my family, and you clearly don't have the first clue about what actually happened. But Colbert wasn't finished. In fact, he was just getting started, and what came next would push Prince Harry beyond his breaking point, leading to a confrontation so explosive that it would dominate headlines for weeks and forever change how people viewed both men. The worst was yet to come. Colbert leaned back in his chair with the smug satisfaction of someone who knew he held all the cards, his eyes never leaving Harry's face as he prepared to deliver what he clearly believed would be the killing blow. The studio lights seemed to grow hotter, the silence more suffocating, as everyone present realized they were about to witness something that would be talked about for decades. You know what I find most interesting about all of this, Harry? Colbert said, his voice carrying a poisonous sweetness that made the hair on the back of several necks stand up. It's how you've managed to convince yourself that you're the victim. In all of this, your grandmother devoted her entire life to service. Your father has spent decades preparing for a role he never asked for. And your brother has sacrificed his personal freedom for duty. But somehow, in your mind, you're the one who suffered. Harry stopped pacing, his entire body going rigid. Don't you dare bring my grandmother into this. Don't you dare. Oh, but she's relevant, isn't she? Colbert's grin widened as he sensed he'd found the perfect pressure point. Because while she was lying on her deathbed, where were you? Making documentaries about how badly you'd been treated. While she was taking her final breaths, you were busy cashing checks from streaming services, selling out the very institution she spent 96 years building. The studio erupted in audible gasps. Several audience members looked genuinely horrified at the cruelty of the attack. This had crossed every conceivable line of human decency, let alone professional conduct. Harry's face went pale, then flushed bright red with a rage so pure it was almost frightening to witness. You despicable, pathetic excuse for a human being, he said, his voice shaking with fury. How dare you use my grandmother's death to score cheap points? She understood what I was doing better than you ever could. Did she, though? Colbert pressed on, apparently energized by Harry's reaction. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like she died watching her legacy being torn apart by her own grandson. Must have been heartbreaking for her, knowing that everything she worked for was being destroyed by someone she loved. That was it. That was the moment everything exploded. Harry lunged forward, not physically, but with such intense verbal fury that Colbert actually flinched backward in his chair. You sick, twisted piece of garbage. You know absolutely nothing about my relationship with my grandmother. Nothing. She was proud of me for standing up for my family, for protecting my wife and children from the same machine that killed my mother. Your mother. Colbert seized on the words like a predator smelling blood. There it is. Everything always comes back to Diana, doesn't it? Poor little Harry, traumatized by something that happened when he was 12, using it as an excuse for every bad decision he's made since. The studio was in complete shock. Several audience members were visibly covering their mouths in horror. This had gone so far beyond acceptable behavior that it felt like watching a car crash in slow motion. Harry was shaking with rage, tears of fury actually visible in his eyes. "You are the most disgusting human being I have ever encountered. My mother was murdered by the same press machine that you're feeding right now, and you're using her death as entertainment." "Murdered?" Colbert laughed, but it was a sound devoid of any humor. "She died in a car crash because her drunk driver was trying to outrun photographers. But I suppose it's easier to blame everyone else than accept that sometimes tragic accidents just happen." That was the final straw. Harry's composure didn't just crack, it completely disintegrated. "Enough!" Harry roared, his voice echoing through the studio with such force that several people jumped in their seats. "I am done with this. You are a pathetic, cruel little man who gets his kicks from tormenting people on live television. You've spent the last 20 minutes trying to destroy me for what? For ratings? For some sick sense of power." He ripped off his microphone and threw it onto the floor with such force that it made a sharp cracking sound as it hit. "You want to know the truth about me? I served my country with honor. I've dedicated my life to helping veterans, supporting mental health causes, and protecting my family from toxic people exactly like you. And I sleep just fine at night knowing that I've never had to make a living by humiliating other human beings." Colbert's smugness finally began to crack as he realized the situation was spiraling completely out of his control. "Harry, come on, this is just television. We're just having a conversation." "A conversation?" Harry's voice was incredulous. "You call using my dead mother and grandmother to attack me a conversation? You call questioning my military service and my integrity a conversation? This isn't journalism, Stephen. This isn't entertainment. This is just cruelty for the sake of cruelty." The prince turned toward the audience, his face flushed with righteous anger. "Ladies and gentlemen, you've just witnessed what passes for entertainment in America. A man so desperate for attention that he'll use grief and trauma as punchlines. I hope you remember this the next time someone tries to tell you that the media has changed." He spun back to face Colbert, who was now looking genuinely rattled. "And as for you, you absolute coward, I hope this was worth it. I hope destroying someone on live television gives you the validation you so desperately crave. Because this is the last time you'll ever have the opportunity to speak to me or anyone in my family." With that, Prince Harry strode toward the exit, his dignity intact despite everything Colbert had thrown at him. But he wasn't quite finished. He stopped at the edge of the stage and turned back one final time. "Oh, and Stephen?" His voice was now deadly calm, which was somehow more intimidating than his earlier fury. "When your children grow up and ask you what kind of man their father was, I hope you're proud to show them this interview. I hope you're proud to explain how you built your career on the suffering of others." The studio was dead silent as Prince Harry walked off the stage, his head held high despite the ambush he'd just endured. Colbert sat frozen in his chair, his usual quick wit completely failing him as he realized the magnitude of what had just transpired. The audience remained silent for several long moments, the weight of what they'd witnessed settling over them like a heavy blanket. This wasn't entertainment. It had been a character assassination attempt that had backfired spectacularly, revealing more about the host's cruelty than it had about his intended victim. As the cameras finally cut away, the damage was already done. Social media would explode within minutes, but not in the way Colbert had hoped. Instead of celebrating a tough interview, viewers would be condemning what they'd witnessed as one of the most disgraceful displays in television history. The man who had walked onto that stage as a beloved late-night host would leave it as something far different, a cautionary tale about what happens when entertainment crosses the line into genuine cruelty. Prince Harry, meanwhile, had shown the world exactly the kind of man he was, someone who could maintain his dignity even under the most vicious attack, someone who would defend his family's memory against anyone who tried to use their deaths for cheap laughs, and someone who understood that true strength sometimes means walking away from a fight you could easily win. The interview was over, but its impact would be felt for years to come.